Daniel now has the honor of presenting today's keynote speaker.
Thank you, Corey. Today's keynote speaker is an internationally renowned physician, Dr. Kathryn Colby, the Lewis Block Professor and Chair of the Department of Ophthalmology and Visual Science here at the University of Chicago. How fitting that she will address the class of 2020. Dr. Colby completed her PhD in neurobiology at Brown University before completing her medical school training at the University of Maryland. She then did her residency training in ophthalmology at Harvard Medical School, where she would go on to teach for over 10 years. In August of 2015, Dr. Colby joined the faculty at the University of Chicago, at which point she became the first female clinical chair in our institution's history. Dr. Colby is an example of a triple threat in medicine: a clinician, a researcher, and an educator. As a clinician, Dr. Colby is an expert on ocular surface tumors, including conjunctival melanoma and squamous cell carcinoma. As a researcher, Dr. Colby determined the optimal surgical techniques for placement of the implantable miniature telescope, a vision rehabilitative device for patients with macular degeneration. Finally, as an educator, Dr. Colby has passionately trained hundreds of medical students, ophthalmology residents, and cornea fellows. In recognition of her contributions, she has received multiple awards, including the Senior Achievement Award and the Secretariat Award from the American Academy of Ophthalmology, as well as a Mentorship Award from the American Medical Association. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Colby on the faculty at Pritzker and as our faculty speaker today. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Colby.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dean Polonsky, Dr. Humphrey, and distinguished colleagues. A most special welcome to the Pritzker School of Medicine class of 2020 and your family and friends. It's an honor for me to stand before you on this momentous occasion, symbolizing your entrance to the field of medicine. And as already mentioned, especially poignant for an ophthalmologist to be addressing the class of 2020. Started by the University of Chicago, white coat ceremonies were uncommon when I trained in the last millennium. There were also no duty hours or electronic records, so things were very different. I can't even remember when I received my first white coat, although I do clearly remember that it was short, did not have my name or any fancy emblem embroidered upon it. It's a special thing to celebrate such life events and mark their importance. In preparing my remarks, I reflected upon what makes an ideal speech for an occasion like this. Pithy, absolutely. Inspiring, I hope, but what else? What messages could I give that would place today's event in perspective and leave you with some pearls of wisdom to take home? I pondered my own life and career in medicine. What were the inflection points for me? What have I learned from my challenges and triumphs that you can use to inform your own careers in medicine? After several weeks of thought and procrastination, I forced myself to put pen to paper, and of course I mean that figuratively, because I actually sat down with my keyboard and blank computer screen. So what are the secrets to success in medicine? In answering this question, I arrived at 5 qualities that have been key to my career and life in general: passion, focus, persistence, integration, and gratitude. I'll spend a few minutes on each quality. First is passion. This is what gets us up in the morning, even in the middle of a grueling surgery rotation or after studying way too hard for finals. Many famous quotes describe the importance of passion in finding satisfaction in your career. The poet Robert Frost wrote, "My goal in life is to unite my avocation with my vocation, as 2 eyes make one sight." I especially like that quote for the eye reference. So passion, what does that mean? How do you find what you're passionate about? How do you find your niche? I'm often asked that question by residents, fellows, and young faculty. The truth is, often the niche finds you, but you need to be open to the opportunities that come your way. A personal example. One of my areas of specialization is melanoma of the conjunctiva. It's a rare tumor with perhaps only 200 new cases in the US yearly. It's one of the only diagnoses in ophthalmology that can kill a patient, and this, by the way, is one of the reasons we love ophthalmology. How in the world would one end up with that as a niche? Here's how it happened for me. The year was 1999. I had finally finished my training after multiple years and was offered the opportunity to stay on the faculty at the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary. As the junior person on a 6-person cornea service, I did not rate prime assignments. To fill my time while I grew my practice at the mothership, I was hired out to a large private ophthalmology group in the area as their cornea specialist a half day a week. This was actually not as odious as it might sound, because while at my home institution, I was simply the most junior person on a very well-established service, in the community, I was the cornea specialist from Harvard. I saw a lot of pathology and did a lot of surgery from this practice. One day, an older man came to see me with an atypical, non-pigmented lesion of the conjunctiva. Even fresh from fellowship, I knew enough to know that the lesion needed to be removed, although my working diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma was eventually proven incorrect. We proceeded to surgery, and the diagnosis returned as amelanotic, that is non-pigmented, conjunctival melanoma. I sought consultation with the then chair of my department, a world-class ophthalmic pathologist whose clinical practice included the management of ocular surface tumors. Together, we managed the patient, who remained in good health without recurrence of his neoplasia over the following 16 years. My chair recognized my technical skill in managing this type of case, and he began referring all of his tumor surgeries to me. More importantly, I became fascinated with the biology of this tumor, which is the topic for another type of talk. A few short years later, my chair had a serious medical illness and could no longer practice. I stepped up and took over the care of his patients, and voila, I was the melanoma expert. This story has a happy ending because my chair eventually recovered and returned to lead the ophthalmic pathology lab at the infirmary, where we enjoyed a long and happy working relationship that resulted in a number of important papers in the field of ocular surface tumors. I consider myself extremely fortunate to have him as a beloved mentor to this day. More on mentorship in a few minutes. So be open to what life presents you. Find a field that sparks your imagination, where your efforts can advance the understanding or management of the disease. Grab life by the horns and live with passion. The second important quality is focus. In our current world, we are surrounded by distractions. Not uncommonly when I lecture, I look out into the audience to see a good number of people on their devices. Why? Is my talk boring? I don't think so. Are they answering a critically important email? Probably not most of them. I think it comes down to habit. Smartphones open up the world in a way that was not possible 20 years ago. Believe it or not, those of us in the boomer generation survived medical school and even took care of patients without the internet. I'm sure the millennials in the audience cannot even imagine a world without instant access to all information. But this comes at a cost. Edward Hallowell, a psychiatrist formerly at Harvard, has described a syndrome known as attention deficit trait from our constant bombardment with information. He hypothesizes that due to overload, the brain goes into a fight or flight mode, reducing the functioning of our higher cortical centers, leaving us at the mercy of our more primitive brain regions, causing anxiety, irritability, anger, and even panic. Constant distraction is not compatible with optimal functioning. So, a plea: put down your devices, at least intermittently. Focus on your studies. Focus on your research. Focus on your patients. Get outside. Eat well. Exercise. Try to get enough sleep. And most importantly, connect with other people. And more about that in a moment. Another effect of this information overload is that we educators need to change the way we teach our learners. Back in the day, one could theoretically learn everything one needed to know to practice medicine. This is clearly no longer the case. We must teach you more than how to memorize factual information. We must teach you how to learn, how to gather and critically evaluate new information, and how to apply and advance this knowledge. You are fortunate to be at an institution that recognizes the importance of this educational approach. Persistence. Medicine is full of examples of great ideas that were originally ridiculed. A story with ophthalmic connections involves Judah Folkman, a pediatric surgeon at the Boston Children's Hospital. Some 50 years ago now, Dr. Folkman hypothesized that solid tumors were dependent upon new blood vessel formation, so-called angiogenesis, for survival, and that inhibition of angiogenesis would cause a tumor to wither and die. At the time, Folkman's approach generated controversy, in part because his views contradicted the established knowledge regarding cancer, but also because he was a surgeon and not a traditional researcher. His theories were met with a dismissive attitude and open criticism. He was also subject to many attacks because he struck a deal with industry to fund his research when governmental agencies would not fund his innovative approaches. I had the privilege to know Dr. Folkman, who died suddenly in 2008, and heard him speak numerous times. A highlight of his lectures were photos of the multiple rejection letters his initial landmark paper received before eventually being published in the New England Journal in 1971. This story, too, has a happy ending. Of course, we all know that Dr. Folkman was right. In 2004, the first anti-angiogenic agent, bevacizumab, was approved for colon cancer. Today, this drug and others like it are the mainstay of therapy for common blinding eye diseases that are characterized by aberrant blood vessel formation, including age-related macular degeneration and diabetic retinopathy. So, have the courage of your convictions despite the naysayers, and recognize that often the most innovative ideas are the ones that provoke the most resistance. Don't give up. I'm not sure where ophthalmology would be today had Dr. Folkman not persisted. I struggled with what to call the next quality and came up with integration. What I mean by this is strive to make meaningful connections with other people, your family and friends, your colleagues, and your patients. I left a very successful practice in Boston last year to join the University of Chicago. One of the hardest things for me in the transition was saying goodbye to my patients, some of whom I'd cared for almost 20 years. For the last 3 months of my time at the infirmary, every clinic was filled with goodbyes. I was thrilled to come to the opportunities that awaited me at the University of Chicago, so for me it was bittersweet. But for many of my patients, it was just plain sad. However, both they and I realized that our lives had been enriched by our relationship, even if it was at its end. Of course, as a surgeon, I do love to operate, and I intrinsically love being able to figure things out through my research, but my relationships with my patients have been one of the greatest sources of satisfaction and joy in my career. Similarly, make connections with colleagues, younger and older. The mentoring relationship is so special. Again, I count myself incredibly fortunate to have had a number of wonderful mentors throughout the years. Indeed, one moved to Chicago a decade before I did, and reconnecting with him here in the Windy City made my transition much easier. Being a mentor is also incredibly rewarding. To see a young mind blossom under your guidance and to someday even surpass you is truly one of the highlights of the academic world. Sir Isaac Newton and others before and after him have said, "If I've seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants." So class of 2020, find shoulders to stand on, and when it's time, step up and provide shoulders for others. Finally, gratitude. We have all been given a great gift, the privilege of serving our fellow men and women as physicians. As you receive your white coats today, reflect upon the solemn trust that will be placed on you by your patients. It is a great responsibility, but also a great honor. You will heal when you can and comfort when you cannot. How fortunate we all are to have found such a meaningful calling. But besides your career choice, I encourage you to be grateful for everything else you've been given. Health, intelligence, freedom, family, friends, the list is endless. Not a single person in this chapel today has gotten where they are without the help from others. Recognize and be grateful for that help. At the reception today, please take a moment to thank those who have helped you get to this point. Parents, siblings, life partners, close friends, mentors. As a parent, it's very meaningful when my children acknowledge my efforts on their behalf, especially having lived through their teenage years. Although I know their true understanding of all a parent does will only come when they have their own children. Cultivate gratitude and express it freely. Having an attitude of gratitude helps lessen the sting of the inevitable disappointments and failures in life. Passion, focus, persistence, integration, and gratitude. These are my secrets to a charmed life. I congratulate all of you on your accomplishments thus far and hope that each of you will find joy and satisfaction in this noble profession we have chosen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Colby. That truly was deeply personal and very inspirational. And I think it's probably obvious to everyone here that although she has been on our campus for only a year, the impact she has already made is considerable. Thank you.